everyone. Welcome to God's Grace on Thee. Today I decided we were going to start at the beginning again in Genesis and read Bible. But researching also means listening in on other people's description of what they have found to be, and that kind of keeps me in the right sequence that I need to be in. In other words, I know that I'm reading what the right way. In other words, I'm not just making up stories. I'm literally having my research justified it, and that's what I'm looking for. So we know that there's a lot of people that they say the Bible has been manipulated. The Bible has been taken over by the bad people. Back in the biblical times, they had removed a lot of scripture from the Bible or the Torah, and so a lot believe that it's been manipulated. It's not the whole truth, and so a lot of them just disregard. A lot of people just disregard the Bible, and a lot of people want to know, are there hidden messages in this Bible? And the answer is, well, yes, but nevertheless, I do believe the Bible to be the Word of God. And I don't believe that God would allow anybody to manipulate His words. I find that very hard to even fathom. So, like I say, there's a lot of people around that they talk of religion, they talk of spirituality. They even go into there's a lot of people that are in that new wave or New Wave religion. I don't know what they call it, but in order to know that the Bible is real, you've got to research and understand it. So there's proof in the Bible, and we can begin with that. Okay, so let's look at Proverbs 25:2, and it states as follows: that the glory of God to conceal a thing, a duty, and honor a king's to search out that matter. Extraterrestrial document, in other words, that's what they refer to. The book is an extraterrestrial document that it's a supernatural document that was extraterrestrial in origin. In other words, it was outside of our time and domain. Okay, so many people want to know if there are hidden things in the Bible, and of course the answer is yes, but we need to start from the beginning, and the beginning meaning, who was the oldest man on earth? Most people know that. You know it? It's Methuselah. Methuselah lived for 969 years. So the flood of Noah was preached about for 4 generations, and God had told Enoch that the judgment of the flood would be held back, and I'll show you in this slide. The 600 year, the death of Methuselah, the flood of Noah was to occur as long as, they called it the judgment flood. And we find that in Genesis. So in Noah's 600th year, Methuselah died and the flood came. And then we go and move forward. Now, we are going to look at the Hebrew alphabet. In the Hebrew letters, not only do they carry sound, but they carry meaning. And there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. And it begins with T. Olaf is written like an oxen head. So that's the meaning. Olaf is oxen head. Bet describes a house, a tent, family dwelling, okay? Like in Bethlehem, we know to be of bread, or Bethel was the house of God. And then we find and that refers to a leader of the house. It's kind of a word for father, in other words. Then we have hech, and it's like a breath. It's like the breath spirit, so to speak. So Ahab means heart or love. It's the essence of the Father. And in Genesis, there's only 2 people that actually had their name changed by God, and that was Abram and Sarai. And Abram was, when God put the hech, or the breath in them, for example, Abram was turned to Abraham. And of course, Sarai was turned to Sarah, with the H on the end. In chapter 3 of Genesis, it talks all about the seed. Chapter 4 discusses the murder, and that was Cain and Abel. Then in chapter 5, we find the genealogy, and of specifically 10 people. Now the genealogy is somewhat tedious in that there's so many in the lineage that it's hard to not only understand, but actually to be able to pronunciate their names. And that's what makes it so difficult to even remember them. I mean, there's no way I can. But it's important to understand this because it's going to lead into what we're finding out about Genesis. So we have Adam. These are the 10. Adam, Seth, Enoch, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. And these are the most important people in this genealogy. Well, what do they mean? Well, Adam means or is equal to Adoma, and Adoma means man. Seth means appointed. Well, how do we know that? Because it tells us in the Bible in Genesis 4:25, and it says, "For God has appointed me incurable." So he was appointed. Enosh means mortal or frail or miserable, and it comes from the root anash, to be incurable, used of a wound, grief, woe, sickness, or wickedness. Any of those words applies to the meaning of that word. And Kenan means sorrow, dirge, or elegy. Mahalalel means blessed and the name of God, so it means the blessed God. And Jared means shall come down. Enoch means teaching. Lamech means relief, and Noah means comfort. So if we put two columns together, and we have the list of all the 10, and then we have the meanings right next to their name, it says, if you read it from the top down, it says, man is appointed, mortal, sorrow, and the blessed God shall come down, teaching. His death shall bring the despairing comfort and rest. Is that amazing? I never knew that. But I learned that. And even the guy that I learned from had no idea how that became. So that's why I say it's so important to understand not only, you have to literally cross-reference everything, you have to understand the true meaning, because when you find that, then you're going to realize that the Bible is true and the Bible is real, and it wasn't manipulated as much as most people want to believe in, because there's so much information that flies around. There's truth, and there's information out there that is not true, and the more people push that narrative, the more people follow, and they tend to believe it. And then what you have is a world of confusion, because you have disinformation, you have true information that's going around, and you have weak-minded people, and you have strong people. So the strong people that do the research, learn and understand it, are not going to be fooled like the weak. So then we know that God's plan of redemption was not a knee-jerk reaction or a surprise. God already knew beforehand that he appointed them. He knew before he even brought anybody to earth. He already knew each person's life and what they would do, how they would live it, and whether or not they would fulfill his desires, God's desires. And that's to live in godlike fashion. Okay? So he already appointed them. So their life was already set in stone, so to speak. All of our lives are, actually. But, the good Lord has given us not only discernment, but He's given us free will. And it's that free will that sets our destiny. And it depends on how you understand what God is all about. If you come into this earth and no one teaches you anything about God, you're going to live that way, knowing that you're here, you're gonna grow up, you're gonna educate yourself, you're gonna get married, you're gonna have kids, you're gonna get a job, and you're gonna die. Boom, that's it. And that's not what it's all about, but to each his own, right? Okay, so in Ephesians 1:4, when did God have His eye on you? Does anybody know? Well, it was before the foundation of the world. I just explained it to you. So God knew before He created anything that the entire destiny of every man on earth, and He knew that it would take a display of infinite love to remedy the situation. And we don't see much love going on right now. We see a lot of confused people. We see a lot of people that have literally separated themselves out from one another because there is so much chaos that's going on right now in this evil world. And it's not the world so much that's evil, it's the people in it. And it's the fallen angels that actually set this world up as it is, and we're all sinners in it, unfortunately. Okay, so this particular minister was saying that there was no way that anyone could convince him that a group of Jewish rabbis were contrived, and they tried to hide a summary of the Christian gospel that was tucked away in a genealogy of the Torah. And he says there's no way. So he begins to explain to us that the Bible is an integrated design. Every detail is in there deliberately. And the New Testament, he says, is in the Old Testament. It's concealed. And the Old Testament is in the New Testament that is revealed. So it works both ways. And they're similar in that respect. Okay, so we find in Genesis that all languages flow towards Jerusalem. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, we find that the nations that are east of Jerusalem, the writings go from right to left. That's Hebrew, Arabic, Sanskrit. And then we find that all the nations that are west of Jerusalem, they write from left to right. That's the English, the German, Latin, the Greek, Cyrillic. So this chart that I'm going to show you of Genesis, reading from right to left, is the most venerated part of the Old Testament of the Tanakh, because it's the Torah, which is an equivalent of 4 letters, much like the Torah that we have. T-O-R-A, T-O-R-H, same thing. So if you go to the first T equivalent, and we'll show you that in this chart, then from this point you count 49. So the first T is the equivalent. Count 49, you come up to Ovav. And then you count another 49 until you get to Aresh, or the letter R. Then you count another 49, you get to Hech, and that spells Torah. Each one of those letters, the T, Aresh is spelled with an R. You've got Ovav, so that's T, the Ovav, Aresh, and the Hech. And that spells Torah. And that's strange, right? Because they spell the books of Moses. So go to Deuteronomy now, and it's spelled backwards, H-R-O-T. Here's the slide. Let me show you. The next book is Leviticus. Now, it doesn't occur there at all. When you go to the next chapter, in Numbers, you're going to find that it happens backwards. So why was Leviticus passed over? Well, we find in the Hebrew 7th letter intervals, and it spells YHWH. And most people pronounce it Yahweh. This is so fascinating. Are you with me? Are you fascinated yet? We're going to check out this next slide here. We find Genesis and Exodus, then we have Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. So Genesis and Exodus are on the left and Numbers and Deuteronomy on the right. So Genesis and Exodus both spell Torah, T-O-R-A. And then you have Leviticus, which is Yahweh. And then you have Numbers, which is spelled backwards, A-R-O-T. Deuteronomy, backwards, A-R-O-T. So this happens that was through every 7th letter intervals. God's dealing with numbers. And most people don't even never understand that. It's very difficult unless you literally are so fascinated by it that you're willing to take the time to learn it. I know many people out there are finally learning how to work the gematria, and that's pretty simple because all you have to do is type it in. You have the system already set up for you. Okay, so numbers have meaning. Numbers express themselves, and that's how Jesus, and I mean that's how God speaks. I just put out a video, and it deals in numbers. And the numbers that I'm speaking of are Tesla's numbers. And we've all heard of Tesla's numbers, right? It's called Lock, Stock, and Barrel, and it's on Rumble. So if you get a chance, go and view that because it is fascinating the way that they explain how the 3, 6, and 9 is literally used over and over. And it's... I can't even begin to tell you. You just have to go watch it. That's how fascinating it is. So Genesis chapter 38, the Torah, T-O-R-A, is our equivalent of Torah, T-O-R-H. And, okay, so back to Genesis. We begin the story of Joseph, and that happens in chapter 37. We need to know this, which continues to the end in chapter 50. So 37 through 50 in Genesis, we're told that Joseph was sold by his brothers. And he was tricked into having sex with his daughter-in-law, Tamar, which gave birth to 2 sons out of wedlock. And this is why the story is in this point in the Bible. It just doesn't seem to fit, does it? Okay, I thought it was strange as well. So we know in Genesis 38, if you're reading this from right to left, the 49 letter increments, we find that we go from Rosh, Ruth, then to Yeshi or Jesse, and then after that we come to Davi or David, which is 49 increments in the genealogy of David. And this was long before David was even around, okay? So God had planned this for his people, and the people were upset. They wanted a king, right? In this story of David. So they were upset. They wanted a king because they had none. So what does God do? God brings in Saul and puts him in as king. And so then we know that they had a learning experience during that time as well. Okay, so David was already ordained long before he was even born. So that was necessary to explain. And I'm going to end it right here. Be sure and come back because this is a continuation of series. And I think we're going to be doing 4, 5, or 6 because there's so much information to understand. And I want to make sure that I do it the correct way, okay? So, so be sure and share your smile and give someone you love a hug because life is too short. And be sure and do something really kind for somebody that you don't know. You know, we are the angels here on earth. And for those who walk try to walk, I should say, in godlike fashion, we have what we call compassion. And with compassion goes helping others. So it's very important. Okay, folks, come back because there's more. We're just getting started. But I needed to give you that history in the beginning, so that you would understand this entire chapter of Genesis. Okay, kids. Love you. See you. Bye.